Hi, I'm Kristen Pratt. I am an author and I'm also the brand and curriculum manager for Masterbooks. And joining me today is Jessica McCullough, who is also an author, and she's a member of the marketing team and our social media manager. You may recognize her as the lead of our Facebook group, the Moms of Master Books. So, welcome, Jessica. And today we're going to be discussing the Master Books method. So we're going to start right off by asking you a question. So, what drew you to Master Books in the first place?
So, the first thing really that drew me to Masterbooks was the biblical foundation of all of the curriculum. Masterbooks curriculum starts with the Word of God, and then it kind of prompts us to look at each area of study through a biblical lens. So, it using Masterbooks helps me to take my faith out of just a Bible curriculum time or a family devotion time. And so it really infiltrates like every area of what we study and discuss. And that was the main thing that I was looking for when I was looking for curriculum. And then another thing that kind of pushed us in the direction of Masterbooks is we were using other curriculum and my children were starting to have some struggles and tears from math and some other different things that were causing frustrations. So I was kind of on the hunt for something that met their needs, but also and encouraged growth, but didn't take large amounts of time, didn't cause them to have meltdowns every day. And so that's kind of what brought us to Masterbooks. Um, Learning doesn't have to be painful, and I wanted to be able to share that with my kids, but I didn't really know how to do that before I found Masterbooks. So the Masterbooks method of shorter lessons, especially in the elementary years, and the real life application really fit exactly what I was looking for when I was looking around. So the shorter lessons are often associated with the Charlotte Mason approach that is talked about quite frequently. And many of the Masterbooks courses, especially in the elementary years, are influenced by Charlotte Mason. So, what elements of our courses show that influence?
Well, you see it a lot, especially in the elementary grades. For our younger learners, we do like to keep the lessons shorter. This has a huge impact on their retention and what they actually learn. When you think about getting a drink, if you get a drink from a faucet, you're actually going to be able to swallow and enjoy more of that water than if you try to get a drink out of a fire hydrant. Getting a drink out of a fire hydrant, while it may satisfy your thirst, you're going to get really wet and you may not enjoy the process and you might not actually get much to drink. So that's the thought behind the shorter lessons, but it's not just a thought and a pleasantry, and we don't do that just to make life easier for the mom. It's actually being proven in research that children retain more. When you think about the stress factor alone, if we as parents think about what happens when we get stressed, we shut down. We can't think straight. We have to remove ourselves from the situation in order to get our head clear. That's where that whole saying goes, I need to walk out and clear my head. Well, our kids are no different. Once they hit that stress point, they're just shutting down. And so doing more and more and more of the same is not helping. And what we want to do is we want to introduce kids to the new material without bringing them to that point of stress. And so the shorter lessons help us to achieve that goal, and it's more pleasant for us and the student. So you're going to find that Charlotte Mason influence with the shorter lessons. And then you're also going to find narration and copy work. I'm going to let you talk a little bit about the copy work because I know that you've researched it a little bit. So go ahead and share why you feel copy work is beneficial.
Okay, well, that's a question that we get a lot because sometimes people feel like it is just busy work. We're just trying to fill space or fill time. But copywork has there are a lot of benefits to it. Um, there are things like it builds our ability, our memory, right? So you are working on remembering what you just looked at and bringing it over to where you're writing at. So you're starting to see memory built. If you did copy work with like a first grader, they're going to be really focusing one letter at a time. But as they continue to mature, you're going to see that their ability increases on how much information they can transfer at one time. When I do some type of copy work, I can bring over several words at a time. So you're really increasing the ability, the memory ability there. And
Yeah,
then
go ahead.
and then the other part, some other parts to it are that whatever topic you're talking about, it helps to memorize the information. So while you're having brain development and growth in the expansion of the ability to use your memory, you're also memorizing. So if you want to work on scripture memorization, copywork is a great way to do that. But really, whatever the topic is, if you're studying history, if you're going to do some type of copywork related to the history, it will help the child to retain that information because of that slow process of copying down the information. Um, so those are just a couple of the things. There's other things like paying attention to details. That's implemented with copywork. Um, it helps with spelling skills. It helps with grammar skills. If they're copying something that is using proper grammar, they are seeing how that grammar is used. And it's not just the fact that they're reading it, but they are themselves physically using the proper grammar. So, I mean, those are just a few of the things. I don't know, maybe you have another thing that you've thought of.
Yeah, just while you were talking about the memory building, what a lot of people don't realize is it is crucial to learning to read. So copywork actually opens up the pathways in the brain that allows a student to learn to read. And how that works is when you think about the process of reading well. First of all, a student has to remember what letter it is that they're reading, what sound it makes. Then they have to combine those sounds into a word. And they have to be able to remember the first letter of that word and all of the letters in between. And then they have to go farther than that. Then they have to put together multiple words and they have to remember the beginning of that sentence, all the words in the sentence, all the way to the end. And then as they develop that skill, then their memory has to expand further where they're remembering paragraphs. And then we're getting into reading comprehension. Well, reading comprehension skills is all based on memory, which copywork helps to build. So it's really, really important. In narration, dovetails quite well with that. Narration, which is just telling back what they've learned. Number one, it helps the student put their thoughts into verbal expression, but it also helps them to remember exactly what it is. And like what you said, it helps them pay attention. So
Mm-hmm.
if they have to tell back to you what they've learned, then they know they have to pay attention. So both narration and copy work kind of work hand in hand to build very similar skills, just in a little bit different of a way.
Yeah. And even one thing that I like about narration is I feel like it helps just with the parent child relationship because I can have that conversation with my child. If they just write their answers just down on the paper and I don't have oral narration, that oral narration just helps us to connect on the topic that they're learning about. So I like that side of it because it kind of forces me into that world with them
Mhm.
and it really helps.
It's a bit of work, but it's really rewarding to kind of get inside their head a little bit. And, kids have such a fun way of how they see the world and what stands out to them in their schoolwork. And I think that it's worth that little bit of pain that it can cause us to have to stop what we're doing and focus and really listen to what the child has to say. Because you just learn so much about them, and it's just really a sweet time.
It is. So, with us talking about the short lessons and some of the copywork and narration, the Charlotte Mason ideas of things, we hear this question a lot: is it enough? So, you know, there's a lot of other curriculums out there where your lessons are going to be much longer. So, how are the short lessons with Masterbooks enough? Is it
Well,
enough?
yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the approaches that our authors use, it really is based in research. And the more research that's coming out, the more the research is saying, yes, the shorter lessons, particularly in these younger grades, it works. And it's not only works, it's crucial. And I'm going to go back to that fire hydrant analogy again, because the student will just shut down and then they're just not going to absorb everything that they need to absorb. And so rather than overwhelming them, we're actually opening up the pathways to receive it. But there's a little bit of a side effect that's really maybe almost unintended, but I also think it plays into why it works. So with the shorter lessons, we are less focused on getting all these workbook pages filled out and all of that. And so we only have so much time in a day. I remember some years that I served as a chapter leader in our local homeschool group. And I remember families just coming to the end, and some of them put their kids back in school because they were doing some of these more traditional programs, and they're still doing schoolwork at 6, 8 o'clock at night, and they're absolutely exhausted. The kids are in tears. Well, with these shorter lessons, what we're doing is we are opening up a whole world of education that actually connects with the child, that they're excited about. So there's this margin. We talk about leaving margin in our lives in today's really busy, chaotic world that we live in. And it can be hard to leave enough margin in our lives for rest and for recreation and just enjoyment. Well, it's the same for our students when it comes to schoolwork. And the shorter lessons leave that margin so that we can take bunny trails. We can do the things that are fun and interesting. We can stop. I'm hatching eggs right now. And so we can take a moment and just go watch a chick hatch. Where if we're so busy with the bookwork, we're feeling like we have to get it all done. We're doing 6 to 8 o'clock at night and we just don't get a break. We're all in tears. We don't get to enjoy those moments. Or what about the student that just is fascinated by something that they learned in their schoolwork? Well, can we pause and even do something as simple as look up some videos, just diving a little bit deeper, pulling some books off the shelves that never would have gotten pulled off the shelves if we were so overwhelmed with a traditional school curriculum. And so I love that about Masterbooks. I love that we keep our lessons shorter because it does allow us as a family. I remember one time when my kids were young, we looked at a wasp under a microscope. It was dead, but it was fascinating to look at the stinger and everything else underneath of a microscope. So taking those things and just really having fun with whatever presents itself. You can't do that when you're overwhelmed with too much work, especially in those younger grades.
Yeah, I mean, that is so true. And that's something that we are able to do in our home.
Mhm.
And each of my kids have their own interests. And so while yes, they all need to study math, they all need to study language arts, and we have our core courses, even doing all of those, we still have time where, my one son loves to draw. I mean, he could spend hours drawing every single day. He has the time to really invest in that. And he's very talented. But if we spent, like you said, until 6 or 8 o'clock working on school books, he wouldn't really have the time to be able to grow in that area. So that's a huge thing about it. And part of, I think, Masterbooks philosophy is the whole child approach, that developmental thing. So in regards to it being enough, well, developmentally, yes, right?
Yes.
Sometimes we think a 5-year-old should be doing what a 10-year-old should be doing, really, and they're
Yeah,
not ready
years
for it
ago
yet.
years ago, we didn't push kids that hard. And again, the research is telling us that slower is better. They gain confidence, it gives time for maturity. And sometimes a kid is academically ready for something that they're not physically ready for. And that's where I love the materials that Carrie Bailey has produced in the younger years that focuses more on doing and developing instead of always pushing the academic side. And there are some academics in there. I don't want to say that her curriculum doesn't have academics because it does, but it does it at a more reasonable approach that is based on the whole child, not just academics. And it just goes together so well. Those two things support each other. And if you don't have, today's day and age, kids lack some of the fine motor skills that was developed with through coloring and non-screen time. We didn't have screen time, so the kids occupied themselves in other ways, and those things developed hand-eye coordination, muscle strength, a whole bunch of things. And so our younger materials really focus on those things that today's student especially need because of all the screen time. And so if it worked years ago, certainly that approach works really well now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that's a huge part of the the method, is that develop paying attention to what is developmentally appropriate for children, and even putting those those muscle things in, because children are lacking those things today, where they're not having the same muscle development that they were years
Right,
ago.
right.
um, but since we have that slower or that more gentle approach at the beginning, does that mean that kids are behind and the higher levels?
No, absolutely not. They're not even behind in the lower levels because they're right where they need to be and they're absorbing it so much quicker. I know, when I first started homeschooling, we tended to push a little bit harder, but I found that my kids actually did better as I pulled back and we made sure that they understood the basics. They were actually able to absorb more because they didn't have all that stress and that pressure. So even the test scores that people are reporting to us are showing that we absolutely teach enough because they are performing very, very well. And people are often surprised by how, I'll use the word loosely, rigorous, but how rigorous some of our upper level courses are. But that's because they have been prepared in the younger years for that rigor. And so the student is able to take that on a little bit easier because they have that confidence. They don't have those automatic stress reactions. So there's a lot of things that go into preparing a student for those upper level courses. And our students are doing really well.
So now that we've kind of talked about the reasoning behind the methods, and well, we kind of discussed a little bit about the science behind it, and that the science that's coming out is supporting the methods. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about the practical side of things. So something that Randy, your husband, often talks about is something called friction points. What are friction points? Let's define what that is. And then how are they being addressed? How is Masterbooks addressing friction points?
Okay, well, the story behind the story on that is I've been homeschooling for a lot of years, and I've helped a lot of people homeschool through, leading our homeschool support groups. Through we owned a business prior that we sold. We sold all sorts of different curriculum. And I counseled with so many moms. And I just had a lot of experience with answering, oh, so many different types of questions. And over the years, I found that there were certain areas with curriculum that caused homeschool families a lot of grief and a lot of frustration. And so, what we wanted to do with Master Books is we wanted to identify as many of those friction points as possible so that we could smooth them over to make for a much easier experience. And that's one of the beauties about Master Books curriculum. We started out creating curriculum for homeschool families. And so a lot of our authors actually homeschool. And so that's a really neat thing about Master Books because it's designed for homeschoolers by homeschoolers. And so it's not like we're trying to take a classroom curriculum and adapt it to homeschooling. And so I think that just that alone helps us smooth over those friction points. So one of the things that can be a source of frustration is a daily schedule. So we need a schedule that works for a homeschool family. The problem is homeschool families do things all different ways and they have all different schedules. So how do we put together a schedule that any family can use and adapt? What we did was we did up a schedule based on a traditional school year. So 180 days, that's what some states require. That's what would be traditional. And so, but they're broken up by daily assignments. And then there's checkoff boxes. So you can just check it off as you go. There's a column for due dates. So you can just put target dates in there if you want to just assign, okay, you need to be this far by such and such a date. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can adapt it to meet your own needs, but it still gives you some sort of a schedule to work with. And I love that because there's nothing that frustrates me more than preparing for my school year, looking at this curriculum and saying, okay, what are we supposed to be doing every day? And so without that, you know, that ability to have a schedule planned out for you, as a mom, you're stuck either creating your own or winging it. Creating it your own is very time consuming, and winging it means it's probably not going to get done. And so we put a lot of time and thought into that daily schedule. So that's a big one right there. We tried to make the curriculum as independent as possible. I think that this is really key for developmental purposes, in addition to making it easier for a homeschool mom to homeschool multiple children, multiple ages. Some people may not know that Randy and I have 9 children. And so, you know, at times I was homeschooling 5 children, 5, maybe 6, I'm not sure, with little ones in tow as well. And so it can be a real challenge for a homeschool mom to be all things to all people. And so anywhere that we can make that a little bit easier, we do try to do that. But the perks of that is developmentally, a child needs to transition to taking over their own education and their own learning. This will benefit them as an adult, whether they are raising a family, whether they are entering the workforce, whether they're a volunteer somewhere, to be able to analyze what needs done and do it without having somebody standing over their shoulder is a really important skill, and it's one that we want to foster. So we've touched a little bit on how customizable our curriculum is. A couple of the features that I just want to touch on really quick is a lot of our courses include ideas for extra activities. So if you want to go deeper in something, rather than mom having to start from scratch of, oh, my kid really loves studying plants, Do I search the internet? How do I figure out some plant-based activities? Well, if you're studying plants, you just might find some extra digging deeper ideas that you don't have to do, but are a springboard to help you figure out some fun extra things that you can do with your student. We also often include a lot of really helpful extra materials in the backs of our books. Sometimes it's for extra practice. Sometimes it's, allows you to go deeper with those extra activities. Sometimes there's extra like little booklets to make or just helpful little things that you can add to your course. So we really do a lot to alleviate some of the friction points. Are you able to think of, has any crossed your mind as I've been talking?
Well, the ones that you brought up, I think, are so good. And I wanted to comment on the independent thing that you talked about, which I love because, I'm homeschooling more than one student. So when you have more than one student trying to teach every child all of their subjects, that would be more than a full-time job. So, but one part of it that I like about it is that all of the books are written to the student. So they can easily work independently, but at the same time, you can make that decision on when your student is ready to have that transition. Some kids are ready younger, and sometimes they're older before they're ready to do that. And you're able to sit with your child and read the material with them if you want to, for as long as you would like. So it's not any different from that aspect. If someone likes the teaching part of it, if someone enjoys reading all of the material, you can still do that. And then it's really in your hands. The way it's written, what it does is it's a tool for the parent, and it puts the decision making in the parent's hands. Instead of us saying, we know best, we tell you when to do these certain things, the
Right.
parent gets to decide for each individual child, when do they start making that transition. And that transition has happened differently in my own home, depending on the child. So
Yeah,
that's
I would
something that I like
say,
about that.
yeah, the average age, just in case people are wondering, for them to begin independence is around fourth grade. Some students might be a little bit more independent a little earlier than that, and it may take students longer, but that's generally when a lot of families start to see some of that independent ability take root. And so that's when you can just start thinking, oh, okay, my student's in third grade, maybe I should start just testing the bounds a little bit, see what they're capable of, and then do a little bit more. They may not be ready at all, and then test again in fourth grade a couple of times throughout the year. And if they're just not ready, that's okay. You can hold off until fifth, sixth grade, whenever they're, ready. And that is the beauty, is the parent gets to decide that with the way Masterbooks is set up. There's a lot of areas that we have specifically left in the hands of the parent to decide, because we are home educating, and no homeschool is alike.
Yes, exactly. And that's even with the customizable part. In my home, I might use one course with a child, with one certain child, one way, and I can use the same course with another child a different way.
Right.
So, and then somebody else using the exact same course, what they're doing in their house looks even different from that. So I mean, kind of the options are endless, to where there's ideas given, so you don't have to put in tons and tons of hours of work, because the authors have done that, the team has done that. So that way you kind of just have whatever you want to pick from at that point. So in addition to the things that you said, a few things that came up that I thought about were supplies for courses. Most of the supplies are going to be typical household supplies. You're not, there's, when you deal with like high school science, of course, you're going to need a lab kit. But with most of the courses, these are things you're going to have on hand. And so you're not going to have to go out and spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars on strange materials that you're never going to use again. So that's, to me,
Right.
that's a really big deal. Our books. So our books can be a friction point if they're boring, if they're only black and white, if children are not drawn in. But the books have beautiful covers, they're full color on the inside. They do a lot to get the child to want to do them. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. Another thing I thought about is the grade ranges that we offer and
Oh.
the course options.
Mm-hmm.
So most curriculum companies, if my child's in fifth grade, it means they're going to be taking fifth grade math, fifth grade language, fifth grade history, fifth grade science. Well, with Masterbooks, it's a little bit different than that. I get to choose science, or my child can choose science based on what interests them. And then on top of that, we have grade ranges. So we understand that all fifth graders are not the same. Some
Mm-hmm.
of them, maybe they're more advanced in science, or some of them, they're all different. So we offer grade ranges to give parents the kind of help parents to see you don't have to be stuck to this one option. So I think that's awesome because it just opens up a lot more opportunities for the parents and for the students. Um, and then another one is previews. The previews on our website. I know that that's not necessarily a usage friction point, but it is a friction point when you're shopping for curriculum. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for curriculum and I can only see 2 pages of it, and I'm going to invest a large amount of money and I'm going to have to use this for a year long, I want to be able to see what I'm going to be using. And so masterbooks.com offers, extensive previews. I think most of the courses have the first full week available, and then some of the material further on in the book, so you can see kind of where they get to as the course progresses. Um, so that's a really big thing for parents that are shopping for curriculum.
It reminds me too, another huge aspect that we're working to build is the Masterbooks Academy, where we have video support. Some of our courses they're just in the academy. Many, and they're a full course. Many of our courses, they're supplements. And so if you need just a little bit extra help, or your student just wants to interact in a little different of a way, or and sometimes it's just, okay, there's some fun things that we can do through video that we just can't do through, the printed page. And so we have all sorts of different courses and different supplements that we're making available through the Masterbooks Academy. And so we're multidimensional. And I think that that's a lot of fun, and smooths out some of those friction points. For instance, our high school courses in particular, when you're dealing with algebra, I know for me, it's taxing to go back. And I've homeschooled so many kids. So I could have one that's doing algebra 2 while another one's doing geometry, and another one that's doing sixth grade math. And so you're having to constantly switch your brain over and remember things from a long time ago. And so it really is helpful to have those extra teaching videos on hand. Plus, if you're busy with another student, the other one doesn't have to wait for your help. They can go into the Masterbooks Academy, they can click a video. I know I personally use that as a resource for my students, and I'm super excited about that aspect, that friction point that we're alleviating through the Academy. And I also want to mention, we do have the Moms and Master Books Facebook group, and we also have the app, which is becoming much more popular. And Facebook is starting to limit some of the things that we can do there, but we are able to do a lot on the app. And so we also offer a lot of extra support and mom-to-mom support, and also author support through the app and through the Facebook group. And so those are also areas that we use to solve some of these friction points.
Really,
Uh,
yeah, because there's so many times where a mom feels like she's hitting a wall, or she's just frustrated. And so being able to connect with other people who've used that material before, or who have walked that path before, um, we are offering that to families, and it really is solving a huge friction point.
right, right. Um, you are our author of our elementary Bible series that is currently in process. Some of it is about to come out, and we're working on more. And eventually, we're going to have levels 1 through 6 where faith grows. And so that's really exciting. So, since you are our elementary Bible author, I'm going to ask you about the Master Books religious outlook. What can you tell us about how we view things biblically? What's the approach that Masterbook uses? Can you tell us about Bible translations? Can you tell us about the backgrounds of our authors? What does Masterbooks focus on?
Okay, so Masterbooks is an imprint of New Leaf Publishing. Masterbooks is the Young Earth creation arm of New Leaf, and also does the curriculum. So that's so it's part of New Leaf Publishing. The belief system that New Leaf Publishing adheres to would be considered evangelical Christian. We're not affiliated with any denomination specifically, but just in general evangelical Christian. The full statement of faith can be found at masterbooks.com/about. And so you can read the full statement of faith there. Every course that comes out is in alignment with that statement of faith. And so all of the authors, they agree with that statement of faith. And so you can have confidence that what you see there is what is going to be shown in the curriculum. As far as Bible translation, that is left up to each individual author. They get to decide which Bible translation they would like to have used in their course. But we always recommend that if parents prefer a specific translation, that you just have that Bible on hand, and when a verse is referenced, you can just look it up and use your preferred translation.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, everything goes through that process of aligning with that statement of faith, understanding the basic evangelical Christian tenets of faith. And so that's kind of how that works.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we're going to wrap this up, and I've got one final question for you. What I want to know is, so when your friends and your family say, "Hey, Jessica, homeschooling is working out really well for you. I just love your kids. I love the answers that they give. I know your kids, and they're smart, they're very social, and in fact, we're looking forward to a visit, and our kids will get together and we'll have all sorts of fun." And so I know that you have people that come to you and say, "What do you recommend for curriculum? Do you recommend master books? And, what do you like about master books?" What do you tell them?
So definitely recommend Masterbooks. It's going to be my top recommendation. And really, the first thing that I typically discuss when someone comes to talk to me is I talk about the biblical foundation and how that's the most important thing, regardless. It doesn't matter what curriculum you're looking at. What is the worldview behind it? And so I know that I can stand behind the Masterbooks worldview. There's a strong biblical worldview. Everything starts with the Bible. And so when I'm sharing with my friends, that's going to be my top thing that we talk about. And then the other things that we'll talk about are really those friction points that we just discussed just a few minutes ago. I talk about how this is written by homeschoolers for homeschoolers. Everything is laid out for you. It doesn't have to be complicated. There's a schedule. The supplies are easy to get. You can make it work for your individual family and your individual student. The lessons are short, so you can take it further if you want to, or you can decide, hey, we want to go a different direction. Really, everything is so customizable. Everything, you can make it fit for your family. So those are really the topics that I cover, what we talked about today.
Mm-hmm.
And My main thing is that I want them to understand those things because I want them to understand that homeschooling is enjoyable.
Mhm.
I don't wake up every day and dread our school time.
Mhm.
It's something that I love. I love that I get to watch my children grow. I love that I get to be there, experience that with them, and I'm growing in the process as well. So instead of getting, sometimes homeschooling can be so much of getting caught up in the details, right? Like
Mhm.
you're so caught up in the schedule and in the details and all these different aspects that you miss all of the great parts of it. And so Masterbooks kind of took care of those details for me. They did all that stuff, all that tedious stuff. And so now I just get to enjoy homeschooling. And so I do have people say that to me. I have people say to me, wow, you look like you're really enjoying this. I am. I love it. I don't tell people that homeschooling is difficult and really a struggle. I tell people that it's wonderful. It's the best option that there is. And in my opinion, Masterbooks is the best curriculum to use in the process.
I concur. And with that, we will say goodbye, and we appreciate everyone for watching, and we hope that you learned a few things about master books that you might not have known, or that you wanted to clarify, or to give you ideas on what to say when somebody asks you about homeschooling and about master books. Have a great day.